Well, welcome to Beaverdale Books. We are so pleased tonight to welcome back author Ed McConnell.
Hi, everybody.
And before we begin, and because I'm a marketing person, I'm going to mention a couple of upcoming events that we're going to be hosting. Tomorrow night, we welcome Judge Charles C.J. Williams, and he is going to share his true crime story of a monster in Mount Pleasant. And CJ is a federal judge over on the east side of Iowa, and this promises to be a fascinating talk by him as well. Then on Monday we have romance writer Anne Schreiber, and she's going to be here to launch her new book, Emily's Next Chapter. Now, on to tonight's program. In 1969, Richard Nixon was in the first year of his third term. With the Vietnam War raging and anti-war protests disrupting the home front, he believes a pirate radio network in western Pennsylvania is stoking the unrest. Paranoid, he turns to J. Edgar Hoover to neutralize the network. And so begins the action-packed story of Radio Free Pittsburgh. Edward N. McConnell, his work has appeared in many literary magazines, and he is the author of several books, including Where Harry's Buried and Other Short Stories, Down in the Dirt, and Sisterhood of the Pines, which was published in 2024. All of his books are available right here at Beaverdale Books. So, if you like what you hear tonight, be sure to check out the other books. Jerome Thompson is joining the conversation tonight, and as you probably know, he is retired. He was the state curator for the State Historical Society. So please join me in a warm welcome for Ed and Jerome.
Well, Ed, I have a true confession. In 1969, I began my senior year in high school, but I think it lasted for about 4 years. I remember 1969. And the curious thing about your book is that it's an alternative history. I mean, some of 2025 was put in Peabody and Sherman's Wayback Machine and transported back to 1969. So what gave you the inspiration to do an alternative history?
This story is one I wanted to tell for a long time. In reality, I guess IRL for you younger people, it's 1969. I was actually working, well, I don't want to call it working, I was one of the operators of a pirate radio station in college. I think we lasted a week, and we didn't pick up any girls anyway. But I always wanted to tell the story about doing that because it was so interesting, and how we got it set up was, I thought, would make a good story. I wanted to do it as a short story, but I just couldn't make the format work. So one night when I was kind of blocked, I took a break and I was reading some fiction by a fellow named Howard Waldrop, and he did alternate histories. And his were pretty far out there, but I thought this might work. And I was writing this December, January, February, March, in the winter time of this year. And we have kind of a bizarre political setup now. And I thought, I've got all this material from the present day, and I have to find a vehicle to make it work for the story I want to tell. So that's how we ended up with a lot of the political references from now put into a time machine and pushed back to 1969, the alternative one. And I wanted to write it so it had some satirical humor and other types of humor. And I decided to do it in a prologue to the actual story. And I read all the professional writers, and they tell you, don't write prologues. It proves you're an amateur and a loser. So I thought, but if I do a really good job on this prologue, maybe I'll be a professional loser. So I did the prologue. I set up the world that these characters were in and had to deal with in this story. And I was happy I did it that way. But from there, I just decided to go from the big picture down to the microcosm of certain individuals and how they were affected by the era that they were in, the timeline, and went ahead and told the story.
So, first novel.
First novel. First time I ever wrote more than like 30 pages. And
But you know, one of the things about your book is that as you do short stories, you do very, very concise stories. And each one of these chapters was pretty concise.
well, just because I'm trying to write longer doesn't mean I have to plug in a lot of words that don't mean anything. And I tried to get to the point in each chapter, hoping that I could propel one chapter into the other, making the story move forward. And I was actually surprised that I was able to pull that off, and I was able to keep things moving as we went along with the characters and the action.
So, one of the things I remember is the playlist that keeps going through the book. Do you remember all of that, or did you have to look it up?
Oh no, I remembered those songs, and I had to leave a lot of the songs that I wanted to put in the story on the cutting room floor because there were so many of them. I did a lot of research on a lot of topics that I was citing, different types of technical issues, things of that nature, and historical events. One of the things I learned by doing that playlist was I always thought Jimi Hendrix wrote All Along the Watchtower. It was Bob Dylan. Well, I know that now. So I actually learned something. Maybe I'll buy a copy and see what they learned.
Well, I thought you were actually wrong on one of those pieces, because I remember it, you know, in college, being in a fraternity, and I went, that's not from 1969, that's from 1971. And I went back and looked, and you were right.
Yeah.
It was 4 years.
Could be.
Part of the four.
Yeah, or it may have been something else that was fogging my mind.
Well, we won't go into that.
No admission.
But yeah, it you know, we played a lot of those records on the pirate radio station in reality, and but it was easy to pick out the songs. There were so many of them.
How did you learn the technicalities of ham radio?
Well, my father was an avid ham radio guy, but let me tell you the story about the main protagonist, Art Weitz. He lived on my floor in the dorm, and I was walking down the hallway one day when I first got into college. His door was open. I looked in and saw a shortwave transceiver, and I knocked on his door and I said, "Hey, that's a shortwave radio." And he said, "You know about these?" And we got to talking about my father and everything. And he told me he was going to start a pirate radio station using that transceiver. And I said, well, keep me posted. I'd like to get in on that. And so I learned about radio from my dad, but a lot of the details that I mentioned in the book about the technical aspects of radio, I had to look those up. It was part of the research. But I knew where to go.
Well, that's what historically trained people do. Research. Tell us about some of your characters and how they developed.
Okay. Going back to Art Weitz, we'll start with the main protagonist. He's a real guy. And most everything I said about this Art Weiss was true. He was small, he was bespectacled, he was brilliant. He didn't know how to react to women, and you can tell that in the book when he runs into the other character, Gina Crosby, who is assisting Art and his friend with the pirate radio. She's kind of his foil. But he's a real character. He had a long career in Pittsburgh at the major universities down there in the computer science and technical communications. He taught. He was very successful. And after the pirate radio experience, you know how college is, people come in and out of your life. I never saw him much after that, but he's a fond memory for me from that time. Now, every protagonist needs a partner in crime, and I decided that if Art was small and bespectacled and kind of confused when it came to women, he needed a friend who wasn't. So I created the character of Alex Shea, who is 6'6", 285 pounds, and a extremely good football player for the college team. And I need to tell you how I came up with that football thing for the story. On our floor, we had a resident assistant. He was a senior, a guy named Gibson, don't remember his first name. He was all league for the university or the college football team for 4 years. And there were rumors that the Cincinnati Bengals were sending scouts to take a look at it. He was that good. Now, he was never drafted, to my knowledge. He was never given a tryout. I never heard anything of him after he graduated as it related to playing professional football. But I remembered him. Then, a few years later, when I was working my first archives job in Ohio, I was at a conference up near Bowling Green State University, and after a day of meetings, we all went out and we were sitting around having a few drinks, and one of the guys who worked in the Great Lakes Archives Center up there was this real big guy, and I asked him, I said, "Did you ever play football?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "I was all league for 4 years for Defiance College as a defensive lineman." And I said, "Well, did you ever want to play in the NFL?" And he said, "I knew I wasn't good enough for the NFL." He said, "But I knew I could probably play in Canada." He said, "My biggest regret in life is I never tried." So I took those two characters, put them together to create Alex Shea. And Alex Shea is kind of a ball buster, and Art's not. And you can tell when you read the chapters about those two and how they interact. You can tell that Alex is kind of a fun-loving guy who all he wants to do is play football and impress girls by working on the pirate radio and playing music to the girls' dormitory across the quad. Going back to Art for just a moment, when he decided he was going to get the radio station up and moving, I asked him what he was going to use for the antenna. And he said, "Oh, no problem, I'll just hook it into the telephone line of the dormitory." And I said, "This building is pretty big. That'll be about 1.5 miles of wire." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "we should have pretty good antenna." So he supercharged it that way. And that is how we ended up on all the stations of the dial, because he had 1.5 miles antenna. But going back to Alex Shea, I don't want to give this away, but there's a running gag in this story related to Alex Shea. I gave him a physical feature that all the girls on campus loved. And it's not what you think. This is a family program. So when you read the book, look for the running gag. You'll see it all the way through, even to the epilogue, as it relates to Alex Shea.
And I had to look it up. I noticed on page 21.
Oh, here we go. I got that right here.
On page 21, there's a reference to Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Gold Hat, who had the line, "Botches, we don't need no stinking botches."
Right.
But they were talking about a license, weren't they?
Right. Because the character, Alex Shea, said, "Don't you need a license to run a radio station?" He said that to Art. And Art said, "License? I don't need no stinking license," because they had just watched Treasure of the Sierra Madres. So I kept trying to find cultural references to drop into the dialogue of these characters so they seemed more human. I've written 50 short stories that have been published, but I don't have a lot of experience writing at length about particular characters and their interactions. So I wanted to make the dialogue as realistic as possible. There's sprinklings of profanity in here throughout, but it's not overwhelming. I think you guys could all take it if you read it.
Is it banned by Moms for Liberty?
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so I can sell more books, I guess. But let me talk to you about some of the other characters, because, and I'll bring in a conversation Cindy and I had after she finally heard me read the story to her. Clearly, Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover are historical public figures. I didn't have to worry about seeking permission to use their names or worry about besmirching their reputations, so that wasn't a problem. And Becky, when we were at lunch the last time and I was talking about the book, and you said, "Gosh, a lot of these stories have this world-weary gumshoe character in there." Well, I've got a world-weary gumshoe character. I just didn't know how to tell you. His name is Gerald Kingston. He's a regular FBI agent, and he's been assigned to this, what he's been told is a national security threat case. And he thinks, why would anybody assign me to this? I've never had any real good assignments in the FBI. And he's by the book. He's interested in fairness in administering justice. If the law's being broken, he'll arrest the people, but if there's a reason why they broke the law, he'll take it into consideration when he's trying to track people down. So we've got this guy, a regular law enforcement agent, mixed in with all of Nixon's special group to get rid of subversives, which I called the cleaners, which I modeled after the plumbers from the Watergate era. And one of the characters is L. Lawrence Getty. If you know anything about Watergate, think of a name that sounds like that. I didn't dare use that name. He may be a public figure, he's dead, but I thought his estate might be particularly litigious. So I changed the name, and there's no resemblance to that character in this book, but I changed the name. And the hardest character I had to write was the character of Zachary Perkins, who was assigned by Getty, Nixon, and Hoover to find these radio pirates and neutralize them, meaning kill them. And he wanted to pretend, he was assigned to work under Kingston. He wanted to pretend and put out the air that he was just this guy who worked in records and he really didn't know much about anything, but he could learn about radios. Kingston's job was to find the radio pirates. Perkins' job was to have Kingston find the radio pirates and neutralize them. So he needed Kingston, but he didn't respect him. Kingston thought there was something hinky about this guy, couldn't put his finger on it. And with each of those characters, Kingston, Perkins, Art, Alex, later Gina. I went into some background development on all of them so that you would understand that they were full characters, and they each had a role to play in the story. But he was the hardest to write because I needed to make him seem like he was green, but he was actually a psychotic killer hired by the government.
So what about the character Marshall?
Oh God, Marshall. I had a whole chapter written on Marshall. Now, the radio station in the book is in an empty room next to Art's room. And the guy who used to live in there was named Marshall. Well, I thought this would be great if I could use Marshall Crenshaw, the musician, who was there and then left school to go on the road to become a famous musician. Well, I decided, well, I'm not sure I can use him without contacting him for fear of name, image, and likeness. So I looked up some videos of the guy, and he was advertising a tour around New England states in the winter, and he looked really pissed that he had to go out in the cold and visit all these towns. And I thought, I'm going to leave him alone. So the chapter I had written about Marshall Crenshaw, I scrapped, and I put in a different Marshall, and didn't much mention him after that because Cindy and I talked about it. She said, we don't need any lawsuits over this.
Well, thank you for that. Kind of ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, ended up on the cutting.
Except for an empty dorm room.
Yep. Oh, I had a few other characters. I guess I better talk about them. I keep forgetting these people. So we had the government threat, the regular FBI and the covert assignment to go after the radio pirates. And by the way, these guys don't know anything is happening around them until
They're just innocent college students.
yeah, until the hammer drops on them. Well, there's a local general store we all used to go to in college, and it was run by an old couple. And so I remembered an old couple that lived close by Cindy and me when we lived in Ohio. And so I used their first names, Bertie and Bessie, and gave them a separate last name. They were a very religious couple, the people we knew, very nice people, helped us a lot fix up the old house we lived in. These people ran a radio ministry, and they were scamming donations. And when the radio pirates come on, all of a sudden the FBI is calling all of the licensed radio people, and they were licensed radio people, asking questions about what do you know about this, and we're going to come up and we're going to visit you and interview you and that sort of thing. And they were terrified they were going to get caught. So they had an adherent, a listener, who was a Vietnam veteran with PTSD, and they approached him about trying to find and get off the air the radio pirates. So this guy was trying to find the radio pirates so he could listen to his show that kept his mood even. Otherwise, he goes into a rage about Wednesdays or Thursdays and goes out looking for women. So the Barteens keep him on an even keel. In town, at the university or at the college, there is a professor who they were close friends with. He and his brother and Mickey Longfellow were close friends, and they all went in the army together. Mickey became a frontline combat commander after he stopped being an advisor. He took younger brother Sam with him, recklessly got him killed in a firefight by friendly fire. Whit never forgave him, and they hated each other. And Whit was interested in making sure that he found out who the radio pirates were so he could protect them, because he thought Mickey was up to something. So you got private people looking for the radio pirates, you got the government looking for the radio pirates, and these guys were just having a blast playing all along the watchtower and hoping to meet girls. And Art was doing it because his brother was killed in Vietnam. He got very into the protest movement, and that's what aggravated Nixon in the first place. So there's a confluence of characters, and they all mesh together pretty well, I think.
But tell me about the girls.
Oh, the girls, okay. Gina Crosby came into the story. She figured out that Art and Alex were going to have a pirate radio station, and she wanted in on the action. She's a foreign student from Canada, 2 years younger, and she corners Art at the student union as he's putting up posters and says to him, "So which one are you, Smooth Eddie, their stage name, or White Noise, Alex's name?" And Art didn't know what to do with her, and he made some sort of reference to the fact that he thought she was a flasher. I'll let the story, and she denied it and said, "Well, if you don't let me help you with the radio station, who knows what's going to happen? You better meet with me at 5 o'clock and bring your buddy." And so they get together. Alex meets her and thinks, "Holy smoke, look at this girl. She's gorgeous." And so he's interested in Gina romantically. Gina can't stand Art. Art can't stand the fact that Gina writes down everything about him, and Art doesn't want anything written down about him. And it's a major driver in the story, strangely enough, because when they have the program, they make lists, and Gina makes lists, and they fall into the wrong hands.
Not to give away.
Not to give away.
Okay, technical question. What the heck is an OSL card?
That's QSL card.
QS.
Yeah, QSL card. My father had tons of those around the house. They're postcards that were made by amateur radio broadcasters, guys who just talked on the radio. And you'd send them out to whoever you contacted. So if I contacted Jan, she lived in Iowa and I lived in New York, I'd send her a QLS card, and she'd know my name, address, and my phone number, that sort of thing. She'd send me one. And that's how ham radio operators kept in touch with each other back then.
Sort of Facebook for ham radio.
Yeah, kind of Cape Ann Facebook, yeah.
Is there a message in your novel?
Yeah. When all is said and done in this thing, I really wanted to get across to everybody that by grafting our current leadership's mental illness on Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon having autocratic tendencies, the only way this country works is if the rule of law is observed, and if people are treated equally and fairly under the law. And anytime you have an autocrat, you have a move towards criminality. And the criminality just gets worse as time goes on. It doesn't get better. So I wanted to give the message that these two kids inadvertently, unknowingly, were defending the rule of law against a government that was autocratic and didn't, just had enemies lists and things of that nature. As a matter of fact, there's just one thing maybe this is funny, maybe it's not, but in the prologue, this goes along with this. When I have Nixon running for a third term, and if you read the book, you'll see how easy it is to get a third term. And we may see how easy it is to get a third term in 3 years. Nixon had campaign slogans. And then Nixon came up with an idea for a campaign slogan. And he used, "I alone can fix it." And so he brought it to his campaign advisors. And he said, "I want to use this as a campaign slogan." And they told him, "No, only a crazy person would say something like that." So But I'm saying in the end, basically, that the rule of law has to be observed, and everybody in a democracy has to understand that they have certain limits on their power. Because I think we've had leaders in the last 50 years that don't get it. And I'm a little bit embarrassed by the fact that I have people in this room who go and do the physical protesting now, here in town. And at first I thought, why would you do that? These people aren't listening to you. And then I realized, you aren't talking to them. You're talking to the people who are sitting home thinking, gee, I don't know what I can do. Maybe you're inspiring them to join, to change things back to the way we should have them. And I thought, well, I'm not a protester, but maybe in this book I can make my own statement if more than 12 people read it.
Okay, one thing that I felt was curious, and I'm not sure if it was a missed opportunity, but you know, a draft was going on in 1969,
Mhm.
and 70, and 71,
Yep.
and 72, and Gina is from Ontario.
Right.
What might prevent some hulking football player to kind of like jump the draft and go to Canada?
Well, in this book, when the final climactic scene happened at the radio station and the FBI finds him because of Mickey Longfield, Perkins gets there first. There's an altercation at the radio station. A death is involved. At first, I wasn't going to have anybody die. Cindy heard the draft and said, come on, somebody's got to die. Well, and when the guys set up their final radio broadcast, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to put some whammo products in the studio that might be used in the event that there was a fight? And so there was a wooden slingshot, there were super balls made of Zectron, there were silly strings that burn your eyes, Bacardi 151, and
You could have had jarts.
yeah, I could have had that. And there was a Playboy magazine, they were ubiquitous at that time, on the desk next to the radio, and when a fight broke out, the magazine got rolled up and was used as a weapon. Now, it was the September 1969 issue. I felt it was my responsibility to carefully study the entire photo before I put any reference to that magazine in the book. And I can tell you that the Playmate of the Month is a wonderful girl from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and her cheeks are rosy. So, but yeah, you cannot have a 1960s story with college students without whammo products.
I could relate.
Yeah.
I think I'm out of questions. I think
Anybody got anything, or is this just a... Oh, a question from the audience, from way out. People at home just call in. Sarah, fire away.
So I think it was pretty obvious you had a lot of fun writing this,
I did. It was a great time.
because I recognize your jokes peppered through there, and I loved that. And
Well-
it's. I think it's very fun. Not that I know many authors, I don't really, but when you can see a little bit of the person, it actually I like that a little bit. So it was fun. But why Pittsburgh?
I went to college in Western Pennsylvania. That's where the real pirate radio station, my experience, was. And it just seemed to me that Pittsburgh being the closest city, we would there would be an FBI presence there listening. And I don't know why I had Nixon feeling that he zeroed in on Western Pennsylvania. It's one of the things I didn't explain.
No, you didn't, but that's also, like, I think that kind of adds to the craziness of your alternate reality U.S. history that you provided, but kind of having that component. So, Jerome, you asked about Marshall, and you could do a whole spin-off book about Marshall and the adventures he was on in Pittsburgh while his room was being used.
Yeah, but I'm afraid to contact the guy.
It can be a different Marshall.
It could be a different
With
Marshall.
the same name, but a different.
Someday, some way. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted it to be as humorous as it could be, because it could get very dry if you just went through and did. He did this, she said that.
Right.
Sort of
Well,
thing.
and
And they're all very sarcastic with one another, because that's the way college students were, at least as I remember them. At the end of the book, I was told by the experts, don't do a prologue, and they said, if you have to do an epilogue, it has to be real short. Well, mine wasn't real short, it wasn't real long, but I needed to bring the circle full on the characters. I needed to wrap up each one of them. And I think I did that, and I think at the end I showed you why the book that Gerald Kingston was writing was called Radio Free Pittsburgh. So I brought it full circle, just like I tend to do in my short stories, because you go back to what you know. This was the first time I did this, and it was fun to write. Now, I've changed my sleep pattern as a result of this. I would get up, I'd sleep for 5 hours, get up in the middle of the night and write for 3 hours or so. And then when Sue would get up in the morning, I'd go back to bed. And that's the way I did it all winter. I just would go downstairs, the house is quiet, and I would write, and then when I was done for the day, I was done for the day. So it took a full 6 months to do this, which everybody who writes books tells me is fast. The worst part of it was the editing.
that's what Cindy says too, that you're fast.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I walk fast. Yeah, I walk fast. Now we have something going on back there. The worst part of the book for me, the worst part of the process, is the editing. I do everything. I think up stories, I type the stories, I format the books. The cover image was done with AI, with Microsoft Copilot. And I just fiddled around with it until I got golden microphone and a shortwave transceiver, and that's the image that came up. So, but editing the book is difficult, and it's not, writing a novel's not linear. You think of something and you write it down on a separate section, and you don't know where it's going to go until later on after you've done some more writing. And so I had a number of those situations, like the sequence in Canada between Gina and Alex. That was written separately and put into the book. And by the way, I wanted to point this out. I am glad I didn't forget. Stephen King said there were times when he writes that he's no longer the storyteller but a stenographer. And what he means is his characters are talking, they're doing, and he's just taking down everything. Now, objectively, we know it's still coming from me, but I had that sensation in that section of the book. That I'm just listening to these people. I'm eavesdropping and writing down everything they said. It was so odd, but the editing is difficult. I go back each page every day and change everything. I must have 150 drafts of this thing. Thank God I got a big storage door.
What's the archivist gonna do with those?
You know, I don't know.
Shred
I
it.
don't. Yeah, just shred them. Shred them. I don't know. I think they might be interesting for somebody to read in the future. There may be parts in that book that I didn't use that I would use in another one if I wrote one.
So, when you take what's happening now and lay that over with a man who is obviously had his own problems and is not really at all well respected any longer, but
Yeah.
Nixon. But so with everything that's happening, and you talk about through the protesting and things, was it painful to kind of write that and seeing the what's happening today and you putting it into a book? Is it like acknowledging what is going on could be, hard, or was it cathartic in a way to kind of get it out and have control over it to contain it? Like that mix between reality and your story.
Well, the sad thing about today is those of you who go out and physically do the protesting, and thank you very much for doing it, the leaders aren't listening to you because they don't give a rat's ass. But back then, there were 2 working parties, there were 3 functioning branches of government, and the Vietnam War protests spun off the feminist movement, and the civil rights movement grew as a result for African Americans. And even the gay rights movement started in 1969 with the Stonewall Inn riot. And that's kind of what I'm hoping happens now. Certain groups who aren't doing anything at this point because they don't know what to do, and they don't have any leadership from the opposition party because it's useless. I hope everybody can coalesce around the protests that are happening and figure out a way to go forward to say, look, this isn't what we want, and we're not going to put up with it. So I didn't protest the Vietnam War either. I'm just not a guy who gets out on the street. But I understood what everybody was complaining about. And I guess I got even less interested in the Vietnam War when my draft number was 256. I knew I wasn't going anywhere.
Mine was 29.
Yeah, well, goodbye. So it just kind of like, you're in college, and like I said at the beginning, for most of the students on that campus before Art got back from his brother's funeral, the Vietnam War might as well have been a dust storm on Mars. They just didn't care. So, anyway.
You mentioned Pittsburgh.
Yes.
What's the geographic realities of your story?
About 45, 50 miles away is Pittsburgh to the south. So with the antenna that Art had, he could have gone all the way to Moscow. And so these guys supercharged their antenna, and it went just far enough for the FBI, who's listening for something to happen.
Can I follow up on that? Since you have some experience with ham radios, knowing that how radio signals cut in and out in mountainous areas as you come up over a mountain or around a hill, that was one thing I was really curious about. Was I don't understand enough about radio frequencies and a linear antenna versus a vertical, really tall, and how that is impacted with the mountainous areas because that's Pittsburgh is in the Appalachians.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's in the Appalachians, but they're not very high mountains.
No, but I've driven it and had the radio cut out on me.
Oh,
on
yeah,
the turnpike.
Yeah, it
So
does. And I really didn't address that too much, other than to discuss a little bit about the electrical layer, and you use the ionosphere to bounce radio waves
Yeah.
over objects and things of that
Okay.
nature.
No, the technicalities of it, and that's just more.
Right,
It's probably a side trip my own brain took.
sure.
Other questions?
What about the epilogue, as far as like, why did you wait till the end to put so much in the epilogue?
Well, I didn't want a series of individual small paragraphs for each person. I thought if I dumped it all in the epilogue, I could just give a paragraph or two or three, depending on the character, and just run through them quickly, and everybody could have you could have closure on the character. And that's what I wanted to get. With Kingston being the last character who is disillusioned, he's writing a book, he's alone in the mountains in western North Carolina, and he had documentation that he knew what Art wanted that network called, and never was able to get it done. So I put that just all in the epilogue to kind of wrap it up quickly and to get it done. Because I figured after 300 pages, everybody's probably tired, and let's find out what's going on. And
What percent is real history, though?
oh,
Did you
boy.
guess?
I went down the list in the prologue. I was doing fine telling the truth about history until I got to Woodstock. Then there was no Woodstock massacre, but it allowed me to throw in the casualty rates for the Battle of Antietam, which I'm sure none of you had on your bingo card, and then obviously Nixon didn't have 3 terms; he had 1.5 terms, and our Supreme Court today had that immunity ruling, which worked perfectly for Nixon until he got involved with Vladimir Putin. So I had to throw that in at the ending. But Nixon did die very shortly after a trip to Russia in 1994. So who's to say?
Bryson.
Bryson.
Yeah.
I had him fall off a balcony. How could that happen? But anyway, so but that's it. I mean, my telling of things is always more disjointed than my writing of things. But I hope you like the story. I think it's breezy enough, and you can get through it. It's got good elements of humor. It also, I think, has a message. So it's my first album.
Thanks, Ed.
Well, thank you for
I
having
think,
me,
I
Jan.
think you can, get the line and get the book signed.
Yeah, I suppose.
You bet. Let's hear it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.